The UFC 312 is officially in the books, and both champions on the card last night defended their titles successfully. And guys, from top to bottom, we have to give the UFC their due for this, right? Because on paper, we were all sitting around going, what the hell is this card? UFC 312, they're going to charge for this? This is a pay-per-view? And this was one of the prime examples of whenever we see a card put together, we're like, man, where are the big names here, right? How is this a pay-per-view event? On paper, it doesn't look good, but come fight night, the fighters went in there and they absolutely showed out. This was just a very, very good card from top to bottom. It was action-packed. We had finishes. We had some outstanding back and forths. This was a very, very good card from top to bottom. We did have some blunders and some, moments that I didn't particularly like the main event, which we'll discuss here. But from top to bottom, gotta give UFC 312 its due, man. This card absolutely kind of blew me away because when you looked at the lineup on paper, didn't look particularly good. But then come fight night, you saw the matchups. The way the UFC paired a lot of these fights together, they did a very good job because, again, the UFC puts the fighters in positions. It's on the fighters to go out there and deliver. UFC 312 did exactly that. So I thought that this was a really solid card, but let's hop right into it, starting with the main event of the evening between Dricus Du Plessis and Sean Strickland. Now, I didn't really like this fight. I didn't really like this fight in terms of the excitement. I didn't think that this was a good back and forth fight. I didn't think that this was a wow, what a main event type of fight. But what this was for me was probably the best performance of Dricus Du Plessis' career. And I say that for a couple of reasons, because what we've seen from DDP throughout his career, specifically since he's been in the UFC, is what? We've seen this chaotic wrecking ball, a guy where a lot of people just kind of make fun of his technique. They're like, he looks tired in there. He's breathing heavy, but he's still going. He's swinging from his hips. He's bulldozing forward. He's blitzing in. Where's the technique, man? I saw the technique last night. from Dricus Du Plessis. I thought that technically this was by far his best performance that we have seen in his career. It was absolutely spectacular. He went in there, and on two of the judges' scorecards, he clean swept Sean Strickland. And I gave him a clean sweep from watching that fight. I thought, coming off hot off the, watching it last night, I thought DDP won every round. And I didn't even think that many of the rounds were that close. Dricus Du Plessis, I cannot say enough good things about him in this video here, because he went out there and did exactly what I was anticipating him to do in the rematch here, right? When I broke down this fight, I said, look, Sean Strickland's very good defensively. He checks kicks very well. He's got very good front kicks. He's got a really good jab. He doesn't open up enough. That's the reality. And in this fight, I said DDP was going to win by decision, and a lot of it was because of what happened. Sean failed to open up. He went in there and he tried to be on cruise mode in first gear for 25 minutes. You are not going to beat a dialed-in Dricus Du Plessis that is firing on all cylinders, especially a guy coming off of a big win over Israel Adesanya, a guy that knows Khamzat Chimaev, the big golden ticket in the division, is probably his next fight. There's added motivation for DDP coming into this fight. And we just saw Sean Strickland go in there and do the same exact stuff he always does. He says we're going to go to the death, the war, battle, all this stuff. And really what it was is DDP showed up for a war, but Sean Strickland showed up to try to coast and find his way to maybe another close decision or whatever it being. Now, I will say this. Sean Strickland displayed some toughness, man. Going in there, getting his nose broken. That right hand by DDP was nasty. Strickland, I think he said he reset it, and he fought through it. So we have to acknowledge that on the side of Strickland. But in terms of the performance, this is who Sean always is, man. And to me, this is why I was so pissed off when the UFC put this one back on the books for the rematch. Because yeah, it's a good back and forth. It's kind of a close fight like it was the first time. This was very similar to the first time, other than DDP had all the answers and Strickland he made no adjustments. The only adjustment he had was throwing more front kicks, which I anticipated him to do. His volume was low, and DDP's strategy coming into this was, you know what? I'm going to match the jab of Strickland. I'm going to mix things up. I'm going to switch stances. I'm going to drill kicks to the body, attack the legs, utilize the boxing, eventually land a takedown just to keep Sean guessing a little bit. It's exactly what we saw from Dricus. He mixed everything together incredibly well and absolutely easily won this fight over Sean Strickland. And that is exactly what I anticipated. As long as he had an answer for the jab, this was going to be a lopsided victory for Dricus Du Plessis. I didn't think he'd be able to finish Sean, right? Because Sean is tough. He's durable. He has good submission defense. So I figured if Dricus was going to go out there and win, that is exactly what it was going to look like. So got to give your hat off to DDP, man. This was, I thought, the best performance of his career. I know people are going to say, well, Sean had staff and all these different things. This looked like the same Strickland that we normally see. A guy that was hesitant because there's a big, powerful Dricus Du Plessis in front of him. He had the front kicks going, and, Sean, he was doing a good job moving forward early on, right? He was kind of pushing the pace, moving forward, trying to, put DDP on the back foot. It only works for so long. It only works for so long, and I thought this was one of the cleanest performances from Dricus that we've seen in his career, if not the most, impressive, to be honest. The way that his technique looked tight, everything was sharp. He was mixing up the kicks. He was going to the body, going upstairs. He just had Sean guessing all night long. That's what this came down to. It was a perfect game plan once again by Dricus and his team, his coach Mornay Fisser. They do a spectacular job at preparing Dricus for these fights, and that was the difference to me. That was the difference. Sean was stuck in first gear the whole fight, going out there, jabbing and teeping and trying to coast to a close decision to where maybe he wins, maybe he doesn't. That's what it looked like, right? And he landed an occasional right hand here and there, which I've always said Strickland does not open up enough. He doesn't throw enough things outside of a jab and a teep. It hurts him on the judges' scorecards. I guess he hasn't learned anything because he went out there with the same exact intentions, the same exact game plan, and that leads me to and his corner was even like, come on, man, you got to do more. And he just seemed like he didn't want to hear it. Just seemed like he didn't want to hear it. And then the nose break, which I'm sure added on. But that was later on after DDP was already doing what he was doing, right? So nothing was going Sean's way tonight. It just was, it looked that way. DDP was just levels above, in my opinion, tonight. He looked like the guy that wanted to go in there. And there's a lot on the line for DDP moving forward. There's some big matchups in the middleweight division. You heard him talking about possibly fighting Alex Pineda. This is a dialed-in Du Plessis that's firing on all cylinders. He's just damn better than Sean Strickland, man. That's the bottom line, and that's exactly kind of what I was saying coming into this fight. He's the better overall mixed martial artist in terms of when they fight. He utilizes more tools. He's going to win on the judges' scorecards every time. Sean had zero urgency. Zero. He put the car in neutral and was just like, we'll see where we end up. That was literally what he did, and that leads me to this. Last thing I'll say about this. This is exactly why I didn't want this fight. It's exactly why I didn't want this fight, because of the fear that this was going to happen. Sean went out there, did the bare fucking minimum against Paulo Costa, did absolutely nothing. Now, granted, Costa didn't do a bunch either, but Sean fails to open up, man. He fails to open up. He's okay winning a fight, being stuck in neutral and just kind of being like, well, we'll just see where things go, and I'll win a close decision. I'm fine with that. And it's like, come on, man, like you can't do that against DDP. And that's why I wanted Khamzat Chimaev. That's why these up-and-coming guys in the middleweight division are going to be very deserving of title opportunities, because these guys will go after Dricus. That's what you have to do to win. You can't just try to coast on Dricus, man. He's too good. He's well-rounded. He'll mix things up and he'll outland you. So that's exactly what we saw in this fight. High volume, high pace, and mixed everything together. And DDP outstruck him, right? Strickland's like, let's make a pact and stand in front of each other and strike. That's exactly basically what they did. DDP won that fight all night long in terms of no matter where the fight went, DDP's just a better overall fighter. He proved that in the rematch. Like I said, best performance of Dricus's career to date, in my opinion, because he was a lot more technical. The way he was stringing everything together, I'm very impressed from what I saw from DDP last night. And Sean Strickland, everyone that's disappointed in what they saw and this and that, I sat up here, and I know a lot of us have been saying this. This is what I feared was going to happen. He goes in there, he talks about how I'm going to make these adjustments and be more aggressive because I'm not going to win on the scorecards because I don't throw enough. He didn't take his own advice. Surprise. So this is the result that we get. DDP, outstanding performance by him. And again, Khamzat Chimaev versus DDP, that fight's going to be batshit crazy. That's the one that I've wanted the entire time. Cannot wait for that matchup. I hope we get that. Sounds like it's going to be International Fight Week for that. Absolutely batshit crazy fight. Can't wait for it. Moving on. Co-main event, Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez. This was a fraud check. We'll just call it what it is. It was a fraud check. Look, Tatiana Suarez has a very good skill set, right? She's got outstanding grappling, really good submissions, very, very good wrestling. And you just saw, man, and that's kind of was my breakdown for this. I'm like, look, if Zhang Weili, who is my favorite female fighter, I'm like, look, if Zhang can stop the takedowns, she easily wins this fight. She's way faster, way more athletic, way more explosive in terms of the striking. And what we saw last night, the overall skill set. I mean, she was out there doing spectacular things in the grappling against Suarez, who I thought was probably the best grappler that Weili has fought. So what we saw from Zhang Weili last night was, I mean, probably her best performance to date. I know she's had some crazy fights, with the Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the Thug Rose fights, and, some of those more technical, well-rounded fighters, especially when it comes to the striking. Those were very fun fights for Zhang Weili. But this fight right here, this is one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive win of her career, considering Tatiana's undefeated. And I know Suarez has had a lot of stuff going on. She's been wildly inactive, injuries, and she's an absolute warrior, and her style is very hard to deal with. What this showed last night, Zhang Weili is just on another level. When she shows up, and the biggest thing with Weili, she improves coming into every single fight. It seems like we see a new evolution in the game. We see her improve in certain areas. That is what I anticipated coming into this. I'm like, look, Zhang Weili's the way better fighter. She just is. She's the way better fighter. She's very well-rounded. She's got good submissions. While her wrestling isn't the best, and it's not as good as Tatiana's, if she had the answer to defend the takedowns, keep the fight on the feet to where she could just utilize her speed, power, and athletic ability, she was going to tee off on Tatiana Suarez. That is exactly what we saw last night. Unbelievable performance by Zhang Weili. And again, I don't know how she was the underdog. And again, that's people just buying into the hype and this and that. And look, Suarez is very good, and that's what I acknowledged. If she was able to go in there, utilize the grappling, take down Weili, control her, absolutely she could have won the fight and could have possibly have found a submission. This speaks volumes to the evolution in the game of Weili, man. She's 35 and still improving. She's still improving, so she puts herself in a great position. Outstanding title defense against a bad stylistic matchup for her. I want to see Valentina Shevchenko versus Zhang Weili next. That is absolutely the fight to make. It's one of the biggest women's fights that the UFC could probably put together, period, in the organization's history, considering how good Valentina is. And stylistically, what a fight. What an outstanding fight. Both of them have very good striking. Both of them are very explosive. We've seen the improvements in both of their grappling. That is an absolute banger of a matchup. It's the biggest fight they can book in WMMA right now. I hope we get that one next. This was an unbelievable performance by Zhang Weili. I thought she was going to win. I didn't think it would look like this if she was going to win. I thought it would be a little bit more competitive than it was. Outstanding performance by Zhang Weili. Don't doubt her, man. That's what I told you. Don't doubt Zhang Weili, man. She's just evolving. She's got a good camp behind her. I like everything about Zhang. Moving on, Justin Tafa, Taliesin Texiera. I was surprised by this. Because, look, Taliesin, big, tall guy, and I said coming in, I'm like, look, it seems like his height and his size, it just seems to stun these heavyweights and make them second-guess themselves, and they kind of freeze early on in the fight. They're like, this guy's so tall, he's got this crazy reach. How am I going to get on the inside? That is almost kind of the curse that happened to Justin Tafa. Justin Tafa never even really had any time to get going, right? Texiera got right in his face and landed the nasty shot. I mean, this dude, he's a problem, right? He's tall. He goes in there, and I'm like, look, he hasn't fought in the UFC, right? He goes out there. I think he was 7-0, all first-round finishes. So whenever you see that, it's very entertaining, right? But whenever they make their UFC debut, I wonder, are you going to be able to do the same kind of stuff? Because it's usually hot and cold, right? It's either these guys come in and they just wow you, or they come in and they get kind of a reality check, right? And tonight, I thought we were going to get a reality check. I thought Tafa was going to be able to work to the inside, weather an early storm, and then eventually find a big power shot. No answer. Taliesin Texiera, this guy's dangerous. And again, at heavyweight, doesn't take much, man. Only one shot, and in terms of the division, this guy's like a couple wins away from fighting a top 5 guy probably, right? Because considering he's tall, he knocks people out, he's entertaining, he moves forward, and he's got this fun style, there's not a lot of competition at heavyweight right now, especially, at the top of the division, it's kind of the same dudes, but through the middle to back end of the rankings, there is a wide open door in the heavyweight division. Texiera seems like he's going to be the next up-and-coming guy in this weight class. At least one of them, right? Because Justin Tafa, I know, is not a world beater, but he's dangerous. He's got quick hands. He's got big power. This was a great performance by Taliesin Texiera. He proved me wrong, and I was very, very impressed with what we saw from Texiera. The overwhelming volume and like the way that he comes after you, very, very dangerous. Moving on, Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato. This was an interesting fight, man, and I'm surprised that this was a draw because I thought that Bellato won. I gave Bellato the W here, but again, I mean, I guess you could see how it was a draw. I'll have to go watch it back. Great first round by Jimmy Crute. I guess or off the first round because it was the dominant. I think they gave him the 10-8, right? For the first round, maybe I'll have to look at the numbers. Jimmy Crute had an unbelievable first round. Again, Bellato taking an ass whooping, almost getting put out of there early, and survived the storm. And then in the second, third round, Bellato fought much better, right? He was getting the calf kicks going. You know, he trains with Alex Pineda. You could see some influence there. He was attacking the lead leg, landing some good shots on the feet. He started to defend the takedowns very well. I like what we saw in rounds 2 and 3 by Bellato. And in round 1, I mean, Jimmy Crute 2.0. I mean, he came out there, landed some big shots on the feet. He took Bellato down, was controlling him, was landing some good ground and pound. And I mean, that was great from Jimmy in the first round. And then it seemed like he fatigued a little bit. Seemed like he kind of, got a little tired and just wasn't the same guy in rounds 2 and 3. But again, Bellato, that's the name of his game. Getting the shit kicked out of him and almost getting finished, and then finding a way to work his way back into the fight and make it close or go out there and win like we saw against Ihor Potieria in that comeback performance. Just, got dominated in the first round, I guess is kind of what this comes down to. So if he didn't get dominated, I think he would have won the fight. So that first round going the way it did, I guess is kind of obviously what played into this being a draw. But I thought this was a fun scrap, and I figured it would be because Bellato, he's never in a boring fight. And Jimmy Crute, you can say what you want about him. He's kind of those guys that just goes out there and he's either going to go out there and he's going to finish you, or he's going to get finished, or he's going to get picked apart. That's exactly what we saw in this fight. This was a fun one. This was a good back and forth. Those calf kicks were the difference as the fight started to play out. Jimmy could not move the same way. He could not explode in for the takedowns, could not explode into those big power shots. I enjoyed this fight. It was a good back and forth. Like I said, I see, I guess, why it was a draw considering the first round by Crute, but rounds 2 and 3, we saw some good adjustments from Rodolfo Bellato. Moving on, Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado. This went exactly how I was anticipating. Look, weight class change from Prado coming up from lightweight to welterweight. Whenever we see the lighter guy go up a weight class, they're normally a little bit faster. They're normally maybe a little bit more technical. Not tonight. Not tonight. Jake Matthews' boxing he looked sharp. He looked crisp. He looked clean. He was sticking and moving. He was blocking shots very well. This was a very, very, very good performance for Jake Matthews. And one of my big critiques, which I feel like is everyone's critique with Jake Matthews, you don't know what guy's going to show up, right? And I know he's starting to stack some wins together, which is very, very good to see because he's been around for forever, right, in the UFC. And, he's a guy that he's got a good skill set. He just struggles at times to be consistent. And that was always kind of the big thing with Jake Matthews. But I went with him in this fight because of exactly what we saw. I thought that he was going to stick and move, utilize the boxing, utilize the defense, and was just going to outpoint Francisco Prado to a decision. And that is exactly what we saw in this fight. Prado, he's good. He's got good durability. He's a solid fighter. But Jake Matthews having the size advantage, being the welterweight, the guy that is in Australia, that he was going to be jazzed up. This was a very good performance by Jake Matthews. Stuck and move, utilized the defense. Happy for Jake Matthews, man, because this is a guy that has a good skill set, just hasn't been consistent in terms of showing up each fight. He showed it over his past few. Big win for Jake Matthews. Moving on, Jack Jenkins, Gabriel Santos. This fight went very similar to how I was expecting it. Look, I thought that we were going to see a decision here, and I picked Santos to get it done because I thought we were going to get kind of what we had, a really, really good back and forth. Jack Jenkins had what I thought was the boxing advantage. We know he's got the big low kicks, and then he threw it upstairs and was able to rock Santos badly in the first round. But in terms of the overall skill set, Gabriel Santos is just better. He's got really, really good submissions. He's got dangerous jiu-jitsu. And in terms of the striking, he's pretty good on the feet as well, right? So I felt like no matter where the fight played out, Gabriel Santos was going to be okay, and then he could mix into grappling and give Jack some problems. That's exactly what we saw in this fight. I thought both guys were going to get hurt, which is kind of what ended up happening as well. Gabriel Santos, man, when you're out there, you're fighting, I believe, was it Lerone Murphy, and you're fighting some of the competition that Santos has faced since being in the UFC, he got overlooked. And I know Jack Jenkins is a fan favorite over, especially in Australia. He's got a fun style. But to me, it was kind of crazy to assume that Jack Jenkins was just going to run right through Santos, considering how good Gabriel is. He's got outstanding submissions. His takedowns look good. His wrestling, especially up against the fence, the way he was able to take Jack down, control him, put him in some danger with the submissions, and ultimately find one. Outstanding performance by Gabriel Santos. I expected this fight to be a banger. It absolutely was. That's why I think that the UFC obviously put this as a featured fight on the prelims. Very good back and forth between the two. The night belongs to Gabriel Santos because that was a very, very good performance. Got hurt badly early, was able to weather the storm, mix things together. Big win for Santos. Moving on, Tom Nolan, Vyacheslav Borshchev. I almost got my prediction down 100%. I said Tom Nolan was going to win. He almost found a submission right in round number 2, and I was like, I'm going to be a little crazy here. I feel like Tom Nolan, I feel like he'll land some good shots. I feel like he'll try to resort to the grappling. Maybe he finds a submission, right? Tries to take a page out of the book of Chase Hooper and what Hooper did to Slava. And this fight kind of looked what I was anticipating. Look, Borshchev, he's a very good striker, right? He's got the kickboxing background. He's very high level. He's got good head movement, good tight defense, good kicks, mixes things up really well. But Tom Nolan, he's just a problem in the weight class. He's tall, he's long, and his defense is not the best, but he gets out of range, right? And I feel like that's kind of what we see with a lot of these taller guys in the lighter weight classes. They don't have the best head movement. They don't block shots particularly well, but they just stay so far out of range that it's very hard to get to these guys. And that's exactly what we saw. Tom Nolan, the first 2 rounds, he was basically doing whatever he wanted to Slava, right? He was landing some good shots at range, mixing things up, mixing in the takedowns, controlling Slava. But then eventually, Slava found some answers, right? He found some answers for the grappling, was able to keep the fight on the feet. But then Tom Nolan in the 3rd round was doing I know he was on his back for a majority, but he was doing a great job with his offense in terms of the striking. He was throwing those dangerous up kicks, was landing some good elbows, some good shots from the bottom, which, I mean, I was impressed with what we saw from Tom Nolan because so far in his career, I know Borshchev, he's kind of been hot and cold in the UFC. He's had some hard matchups, right, since he's been with the organization. Coming off the loss to Chase Hooper and seeing some of the things that we've seen from Borshchev against Lantop. He shows you those signs of how dangerous he is and how good he is on the feet. I just figured Tom Nolan's too much, man. He was going to be able to mix in the grappling. He's a tall, rangy opponent. And the way that he is just mixing things together, Tom Nolan is seeming like a problem inside the weight class. Like, as we start to move forward, I would like to see some finishes from Tom moving forward. Very, very good performance to go in there and outstrike a guy like Vyacheslav Borshchev, who we know has outstanding kickboxing. Very, very good performance by Tom Nolan. I was impressed. Moving on, Bang Bang Wong Tiong versus Bruno Brazil. Now, I figured that Wong was going to win this fight. I was hoping that she was going to be able to get a KO, get a highlight, and really kind of get back into the groove of things, coming off of what I said was not a fraud check, was a reality check in her last matchup. Look, she has an outstanding skill set. She brings this excitement to women's MMA. She's got dangerous power in her hand. She's got very, very good kicks. She applies very, very good pressure. That's what we saw in this fight. She went in there and just absolutely picked apart Bruno Brazil. Absolutely just, in my opinion, showed levels when it came to the striking, and even mixed in some grappling there right at the end, right? So we get to see that Bang Bang Wong, she's dangerous, man. She's got the it factor in terms of the striking. She's fun to watch. She's dangerous. I like everything about her. I like her attitude, her confidence. That got her in trouble in her last fight, right? She got a little too comfortable, a little too confident, a little bit too overzealous, right? And she got too, she started dropping her hands and having too much fun, which, yeah, you want to have fun in there, but you also don't want to give yourself the opportunity to get caught, right? And that's what we saw in that last fight, which, again, is why I said it was a reality check. She was controlling the fight, doing a very good job, but you saw tonight when she's composed, when she's defensively responsible, sliding in and out of range and firing on all cylinders, she's an absolute problem inside of the division right now. I like everything about Bang Bang Wong. I think she's dangerous. Her striking's fun to watch. Great performance. Happy to see her back in the win column, because anytime you have all this hype, you go out there and you lose, especially when you get finished. How do you bounce back? She bounced back incredible tonight, going out there, getting a dominant decision win. Big win by Bang Bang Wong. Colby Thicknesse versus Alexandre Topuria. First and foremost, Colby Thicknesse he's good, man. He's very, very good. Hopefully the UFC will give him a contract to stick around. His volume, his activity. We saw the resemblance to an Alexander Volkanovski, right? Who he trains with, who was in his corner, switching stances, picking and poking at you, mixing things up. The footwork was very, very good. But this fight right here showed me what I wanted to see from Alexandre Topuria, right? And I posted on X, I was like, look, was it a great performance and the most exciting thing? I don't want to say it was an exciting performance by Topuria, right? Because I would be lying if I said that, right? A lot of people had these high expectations. The last name Topuria, they see the style, they're like, this dude looks like Ilya, which he absolutely does. He's got the boxing-based style. He's got the nasty calf kick. He's got good grappling. What we saw from Alexandre, right? It would have been great if he could have went out there and had that crazy moment, the big finish, the highlight reel. But to me, this is a guy who was 5-1 as a pro coming in, had a lot of inactivity throughout his UFC career, his pro career, right? But prior to getting to the UFC here, this was his debut, right? And I give fighters a lot of slack when they're coming over and making their UFC debut when they're coming from a smaller promotion, right? When you come from ONE or Bellator or PFL, whatever, you're used to these big moments, being in a big organization. So I don't give as much of a pass. But a guy like Topuria, who's had, he's had an inactive career, man. And I know a lot of that's because he's helping Ilya. I saw what I wanted to see. He went out there, he got cage time in, he got a solid 15 minutes in there. He is incredibly dangerous. He fights the exact same way as Ilya. He's got outstanding wrestling. He's got very good grappling, very good control, very, very good boxing. His head movement, absolutely spectacular. His defense, spectacular. The power in his hands, the boxing, the way he mixed everything together. It looks like Ilya, man. I know we keep saying it, but it absolutely looks like Ilya. I was very impressed. I was very impressed with the performance. We saw 15 minutes of solid work from Alexandre Topuria. Now, I will say this. Moving forward, he needs to be more active. He needs to be more active. We need to see more volume when it comes to the boxing. We need to see more output when it comes to the striking, because that's definitely something that can get him into trouble if he's going to go to decisions, right? The lack of output, the lack of volume. But I saw a lot of good things in your UFC debut. There was a lot of pressure on him coming into this because of what Ilya has done. He goes out there. He's had, like I said, a very inactive pro career. Goes in there, mixes things together, showed us how good his grappling is, showed us how good the boxing is, offensively and defensively. Even though I would have liked to have seen more activity in terms of the striking, great performance by Alexandre Topuria. I think they're going to fast track him. I think they're going to give him a big matchup next. Maybe they give him a Peyton Talbot. Maybe they give him a Cody Garbrandt. They're going to give him a name. They're going to give him a prospect that's kind of been doing some things in the division. They're going to give him a big name, a guy who's kind of been around. They're going to fast track Alexandre, man. They absolutely are. He's got the style. He's got the swag to him and the way he fights. I like everything about Alexandre Topuria. I like the respect between the two camps as well. Topuria is dangerous. This guy is a future problem, is a problem in the division and a possible future champ in the making. All right, fight of the night, Rongzhu versus Cody Steele. Cody Steele, man, this guy, look, he's durable, he's tough, he showcased that he belongs, man. He's a good fighter. He was just loading up and swinging too wild. Rongzhu, he's a guy that he was in the UFC, he had to work his way back in. He looked like the guy who was just seasoned. His striking looked outstanding. His speed, the way he was peppering Cody Steele with the jab. This was a spectacular performance by Rongzhu. And I know it was a great back and forth, right? Because they were pointing down, they were slugging it out, and they were going what I call ooga booga mode, right? Like they forgot about the technique and were just throwing these big wild hooks. And that's fun to watch. But I'm a guy that likes to watch some technique, man, at times, right? And I feel like if they both would have straightened out a right hand, the one could have knocked the other out, right? Because we saw them both swinging so wild and forgetting about the defense. But either way, this was a fun back and forth. Both guys were absolutely leaving it all out there. This was a fun back and forth between these two. But for me, the takeaway is this. Cody Steele's still very green in terms of the striking. While he has power, while he's starting to develop, because we know he has good grappling, right? But in terms of the striking, it's still very green. It's still very raw, and Rongzhu kind of exposed that, right? The output, the volume, the accuracy, all on the side of Rongzhu. Absolutely great performance. A fun fight by both of them, but the way that Rongzhu was just able to pepper him and pick him apart, great performance by Rongzhu. Happy to see him in the win column now that he is back in the UFC here, because, man, he's fun to watch. His striking looked great last night. All right, two more here. Jonathan Micallef versus Kevin Jousett. Cut Kevin Jousett from the roster. Just get rid of him. And I'm serious. Get rid of him. If you go out there and you get hit by the same exact shot 30 fucking times, you get hit by the same body kick, you know he's going to throw to the body and eventually go back to the head. I don't know if Kevin Jousett still has figured that out as of this morning since the fight happened. Jonathan Micallef, in my opinion, did nothing special. Everyone's like, Micallef, greatest performance of his career, went out there and dominated Kevin Jousett. I didn't see anything special. I didn't see anything special at all. I know that he looked pretty good and he was sticking and moving and doing his thing. This was more on the side of Kevin Jousett is just overrated. He looked terrible. He looked absolutely terrible. He was moving in his face. He has zero boxing skills, zero boxing defense as well, which is something that we're starting to notice. The trend with these CKB guys, man, the lack of boxing, offensively and defensively. Kevin Jousett was landing some good kicks, just never got the hands going enough. Never got the hands going enough, was not aggressive enough, was following Jonathan around the cage, was not cutting him off, didn't even decide to try to mix in some of the grappling. And look, I know Jonathan's got good grappling of his own. Kevin Jousett kept getting hit with the same exact shot over and over again. He got hit with the same body kick, and I know it's a good body kick by Jonathan, and he was mixing it in well and this and that. That just shows me the lack of striking IQ here. Like, where is the rear leg check? Where is catching a kick? Where is, stepping in and trying to counter and time it with a shot? He did none of that. He did absolutely none of that. It was a very frustrating performance to watch in terms of Kevin Jousett, because I like the guy. I think he's he's got good skills. He just didn't show that tonight. And a lot of that, yes, Jonathan went in there and did his job, but I wasn't wowed by anybody here. I thought that both guys were throwing the same shots over and over again. There was very little feinting, very little setups. Jonathan, it was very obvious the game plan. Attack the body of Jousett, and then when the hands come down to block the body, throw a head kick. I don't know how Jousett couldn't pick up on that. It was like he was surprised that he got caught with a head kick. Very frustrating fight to watch in terms of watching Kevin Jousett. I think that the guy has skill. He just is not stacking it together right now. And again, credit to Jonathan. Went in there, mixed up the striking, kept him guessing. Good performance, but by the same token, also just a bad performance on the side of Kevin Jousett. Like I said, what I saw last night, not UFC caliber, especially in the weight class that they're in. I was not impressed with Kevin Jousett at all. First fight of the night, Salkilld goes in there and absolutely starches Jubli with a nasty shot early on, man. What a way to start the night, first and foremost. What a way to start the night. And I know a lot of people are going to say, look, early stoppage. Whenever you get hit with a shot like that, basically behind the ear, you drop, you bounce off the canvas, it's just not a good look, right? It's not a good look. And again, even if the ref let it play out, I think that Jubli would have just been put out cold, right? Because I know he bounced off the canvas and came up and was, looking for a takedown, but he was going to get smashed. He was going to probably get flattened out by Quillen, and then some nasty ground and pound was going to be landed. That's how I think. I actually thought it was a decent stoppage. I see how you could say it was early and this and that, but at the end of the day, man, the way that Jubli fell back and, bounced off the canvas, and considering what we saw, just in general, Quillen was fast, the speed and the way that he looked at this fight, he had a point to prove, came out guns blazing. Great performance by Quillen to go out there, get a quick finish like that over Jubli, man. And I know a lot of people were like pulling for Jubli. They're like, look, can this guy just get back in the win column and get it done? But Salkild's dangerous. His hands are fast. You got to see that the power is there. Great performance by Salkilld. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Let me know your thoughts down below about UFC 312. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps me out. I would appreciate it. See you next time.